Bonjour. Welcome to the Anti-Racism Coalition Day of Mourning, Learning, and Action. My name is Wawa Tesi Ikwe, which means Firefly Woman. I'm a Anishinaabe from the Leech Lake Reservation. I'm also co-chair of the Anti-Racism Leadership Team. And I work as academic advisor in the College of Community Studies and Public Affairs here at Metro State. I'd like to say a big thank you to the members of the Event Planning Committee, Deborah Mosby, Dr. Raj, and Dr. Nantawan Lewis. A lot of hard work, many meetings, but most of all, it took a communal effort to pull this event off. There's many individuals and departments that were involved in putting this program together, and I think Deb will acknowledge some of our co-sponsors. I'd also like to thank Nancy Tidall, Director of Facilities, who prepared the University Colwood Preparedness Plan, and she made sure that we followed all the regulations in the plan. I would also like to thank President Arthur's monetary contributions, which without that, we probably couldn't have put this event on. We have a full, exciting agenda today, so I'm going to let my co-chair introduce herself, and she will give brief remarks about the mission and purpose of the Anti-Racism Coalition.
Thank you, Jill. Glasses. Thank you all for coming today. It's a hot day, we know it is. There's fresh water right over here around those bushes, and there's gonna be breakfast bagels and fruit available just past that. What we're gonna do is ask small groups to come up and grab you some breakfast in just a few minutes. So wanted to get that out of the way. Yes, we appreciate that you're here, you made time for this. I'm Deborah Mosby. I'm a resident faculty in the Alcohol and Drug Counseling program in the Human Services Department, and I'm co-chair of the Anti-Racism Coalition. The Anti-Racism Leadership Team was started by President Wilson Bradshaw in 2002. Now called the Anti-Racism Coalition, the mission and purpose of the Anti-Racism Coalition is to help Metropolitan State University fulfill its mission of building an anti-racist learning community as an urban university that acts with intentional accountability to communities of color through anti-racism and equity in words, actions, and outcomes. Our work includes serving as a resource, advocating to help lead and support the university in anti-racist efforts, raising awareness, and holding our campus community accountable when institutional racism compromises campus climate and inhibits equity for students and employees. By the way, membership is open to students, employees, and community members, and you can join by emailing Jill Wilkie, and there's her information here and on some other boards, her email address. So I'd like to just take a minute to thank all the entities on campus who have co-sponsored this event. First of all, the Office of the President of Metropolitan State University. Thank you, Janie. And you can wait till the end if you want to, so you don't have to clap at everything, because there's a little list here. Faculty of Color Mentorship Program, Institute for Community Engagement and Scholarship, Department of Ethnic and Religious Studies, Department of Social Work, Department of Human Services, College of Community Studies and Public Affairs, College of Liberal Arts, College of Nursing and Health Sciences. And our wonderful unions, you can raise your hand when I call you, right? AFSCME is in the house. Where are you all? Hey, glad you're here. MAPE, you guys here? Yay, give a yell. MMA, there you go. MUSAF, oh, we see you. And the IFO. Yes, thank you very much. We also want to thank the Multicultural American Indian Retention Services, which is called MARE, Student Life and Leadership Development. I think Phil's here. Where's Phil? Thank you guys for Student Life. Is Maya here? Maya Sullivan? We'll catch her later. Because the Dean of Students Office and the Community Healing Collaborative Grant was made possible due to the collaborative efforts of Minneapolis College, Metro State University, St. Cloud State University, through the Min-State Multi-Campus Collaborative Grant Program, okay? Could you give everybody a big applause? Thank you for your sponsorship. And now Jill is going to come up and introduce our first speaker.
Bonjour again. It is with great pleasure that I have the honor of introducing the person who will be giving our blessing and making some brief remarks about land acknowledgement, Hope Flanagan. Hope is a Seneca from the Tonawanda Reservation. She's a Turtle Clan. She comes from the Dream of Wild Health, which is Native owned and operated, where she works as a community outreach and cultural teacher. She can maybe share more about her background if she feels that way, but Hope, come on up. Do you want me to write the speaker? Do you want me to write the speaker?
Oh,
Sure. Sure.
how? Bonjour, Niji Bimadazik. When you hear that, you hear somebody say that, what they're saying is, hello, my fellow living beings. And you'll hear that when you hear a prayer. Often in the community, you'll hear somebody say that. You might hear in Dinaway Magani Duk, and that's all my different kinds of relatives. When we're talking about this topic, it reminds us that we're all in this together. When you hear Niji Bimadazik, it's not talking about just our fellow human beings, it's our fellow living beings. So I'm not just talking to you that are in human form at this moment, but I'm talking to those trees and those plants and those insects and that crow that's flying over right there. In our teachings, we know that they're just as alive as we are. And for me to think only the human form is important is really short-sighted. We look at this in terms of if I want to stay alive on this planet, I have to honor these beautiful beings that are willing to share this Mother Earth with us. And that if they're not here, we don't survive. None of us survive. Doesn't matter how much money you have. That tree gives us oxygen. That plant gives us cotton or cloth. Those other plants over there give us food. That animal over there gives us meat. We need to remember that we're all bound together on a cellular level. Now, where I work at Dream of Wild Health, it's a native owned and operated farm. And you can see there's races all over there. You're like, what? Well, for us working at a farm, we're being reminded that a race is nothing more than a subspecies. So right now, if I'm holding 2 kernels of corn, one might be Lenape flour corn, one might be an Oneida hominy corn. Those are 2 races. They're subspecies. Remember that we're not the ones that have the corner on the market of racial differences. Our plant relatives, our insect relatives, all our relatives experience this and manifest in different ways. And they all have gifts. They have different gifts. So there's stories. You can't tell winter stories this time of year. In the summertime, you tell them in the wintertime. But the stories go that the creator and the trickster, they got together and they said, our younger brother's coming and they're pretty foolish. Us older ones that have been around for a while, we know how to live on this earth, the plants, the animals, you guys know how to live. But these younger ones, they're gonna be full of ego. They're gonna be full of wanting, I want this for me and you can't have it. They're gonna be foolish about how to keep their bodies strong. And there's old stories about that. So each one of the plants said, I'm gonna help those younger brothers, those latecomers that don't know any better, those human beings, the last ones that are here, they're likely to wobble and fall off Mother Earth because they don't know how to be on this earth. So each plant came and said, I will give this food. I will give this medicine. I'll give my clothing so they can have something to wear. Each animal said, I'll give my fur so they have something to wear, or I'll give my gall for medicine. So they knew that we were gonna come and be full of ego and think we were the only ones. And that we were so important. Our little egos told us that we were so important that we were better than somebody or something else. So it's a reminder every day that when you eat that strawberry this morning or you eat that bagel, that cell becomes part of you. And that cell goes back into the earth and will become part of the next person. So even on a cellular level, we are all one. So when we do this work today, look at those shirts. We call those the colors of the humanity, the red, the white, the yellow, and the black. You'll hear that talked about all the time, about the 4 directions and the 4 spirits, that the ones that are sitting, actually they'll say 7 grandfathers are sitting in those 4 directions, also in the sky underneath and to the water world. But in those 4 colors, we gotta learn, there's not one that's standing out and said, I'm better than him, those all colors, I'm the biggest one. Oh no, they're all the same. They have different gifts. They have different abilities. They have different things to offer. So in this journey, when you're here today, remember that. Remember that we're in this together, whether we like it or not. You know, we can pretend all we want that there's some other planet that we can go to. That's just not true. This is our Mother Earth. We got to treat her with respect and thanks. We have to learn how to share. Now, when I heard this was a day of mourning, oh my gosh, I was really sad about that, because I don't do well with mourning. As Native people, we've got lots and lots of mourning we could do, but it doesn't get me anywhere when I get caught up in mourning. And when I get caught up in anger or fear, I don't get anywhere either. I've got to get into action, and I've got to get into love, and I got to get into prayer for direction. So every morning I put out my offering to the Creator, to the earth, ask for guidance about what can I do today for my fellow living beings, my Nijibimadazik. When I do that, and when all of us think of that, when you see of how can we all work together, this Mother Earth, she gives as much as she can. We're right here on a sacred place. If you just look over the edge of this building, we're on the Mississippi River. This is our native highway. It's the biggest native highway in the United States. We've been traveling this highway for 10,000 years that we know of, probably closer to 30,000 years. And where I'm standing right now, I could bet you money that I'm standing on a grave site. Because all along these bluffs, you can just look right over there and see those mounds. Everywhere where you're on a bluff looking over water, we were honoring the Creator above us, thinking we're getting closer to that Creator, to that next dimension. This is Dakota land. Right here, and that highway, all sorts of tribes were traveling up and down that highway. And they say, well, you know what? We had to share that highway because those animals and those birds and those insects, they travel that highway too. Most of the birds, this is the fact, most of the birds in the United States are dependent on that Mississippi River. They need that river to survive. Some of you have heard that 30% of the birds in the world are gone. And it might be even worse for insects. Like in Germany, they're saying 80% of their insects are gone. In Puerto Rico, 75% of their insects are gone. We don't know how bad it is here because we haven't had a baseline yet. But we need to be thinking about who all uses this highway. Some of you saw this last weekend. There was a bear wandering around downtown St. Paul. That's because his genetic memory told him this is the highway. Now, when I do my prayer, I let people know that I'm a snapping turtle. I was born as a snapping turtle. And in our way of thinking and being, my clan, that's truly who I am. And I'm just for a little while, I'm just got this little facade of being this human being, but I'm really a snapping turtle. And then I was given a job. My responsibility is in my name that I was given. Just as she's Firefly Woman, I'm Little Wind Woman. And that name was gave to me because there was a lady who carried it before me, and her job was to teach children and to help the earth, teach people about plants. So that's what I do. So we can think about, like, why are we really here? Who am I gonna help? How can I help healing come about through all this? Sure, it's a lot of turmoil. It's a lot of anger, a lot of frustration. A lot of stuff is going on right now. I think as human beings, this whole change that we've experienced in the last 6 or 7 months has been scary, and a lot of people are acting out of fear. Think about that. They'll say, oh, I'm scared, so I've got to blame somebody. I'm going to blame them. I hate to laugh about that. It's not really laughing, because I know that when someone sees something they don't understand, they sometimes want to destroy it. So going back to the idea that this is Dakota land, this is Dakota land, but it's still on the books that it's illegal to be Dakota in the state of Minnesota. That's a true thing. It's illegal to be Dakota in the state of Minnesota. They won't take it off the books because there would have to be reconciliation. So there's trouble with that. And there's history of the people from right here being driven not only out of this state, but they drove them further, drive them out of Minnesota, into South Dakota, up through North Dakota, up into Canada. So not only out of the state, but out of the country. So that's the truth of the being. But now I want to talk about the good stuff. Because there is good stuff. As I go out looking at plants and medicines every day, I see that some of the plants that our relatives that brought here are still coming up. The medicines that were coming along this beautiful river here, there's some that we know that human beings brought them here, and those medicines are coming up. And those medicines are for all of us. So we know that those plants, they're patient with us. They're saying, we're still here. We're still bringing you those gifts. And even if I look at those different races of corn, if I say, oh, here I picked this in a genetically modified neonicotinoid field, and here's one that's whole chunk corn that's full of protein and niacin. This one has poison and corn syrup, and they look exactly the same. So we have to look for the goodness in each of us. Don't get too entertained by the ugliness. Because if we're gonna make it, then I say that with a big if. Love each other, find a way to work together, find a way to bless this earth, to heal this earth, find ways to find connections. If we keep looking for, we can find so many ways to find ways to hate each other. That's not gonna help. We've got to find ways to love each other and honor the differences we have, because each one of us comes here with gifts and responsibilities, and when we walk through that, we find them, lift them up and celebrate them. One thing we can't do is we can't afford to be focused on money and power in a way that puts others down, because that's not gonna work. We've seen it too much in the past, and it creates hate, it creates ugliness, and it doesn't promote happiness, it doesn't promote success. We have to look for love and healing. I just recently saw, when they talked about mourning, I'm like, oh no, I don't want to mourn anymore. I want to find something to be thankful for, and there's so much. But one of the things I read this weekend is they said, of the biomass of mammalian beings on this earth, 60% are cows and pigs. 36% is humans. 4% is everybody else, the bears, the deer, the lions, the giraffes, the whales. We've got to learn how to share this planet and promote all life, or we're not going to make it. That's just the truth of it. So I always tell the kids when they're eating cereal, even take a bite. Your third bite, you have to thank an insect because a pollinator brought that food to you and a plant gave you that food. So all of our life together, not just human life, but all of our life has to be lifted up and celebrated. Now, I want to bring out, there's a plant called sage that we use that it purifies. Now, you think about this time of COVID and you go like, oh, gee, you know, she's talking about old-timey stuff. Well, scientists now know that the sage takes down airborne illnesses. So sage does it. We knew that. And then you look and say, well, who's suffering? Who's really suffering with this? It's hard, but we see that a lot of people are eating food that doesn't have nutrition in it. And when you're in a state of need and you don't have access to healthy food, of course, your immune system is going to be compromised. If you're struggling with drugs, if you're struggling with other things, your immune system's gonna suffer. So we've got to be thinking about those plants have to be healthy or they can't give us the gift of strong life to fight off these illnesses. So I know I'm looking big picture here, but I know there's really brilliant minds in this audience. I'm so grateful to see such a rainbow of people here. I'm really eager to hear what all has to be said, but I do want to burn a little sage and smudge off my feather. When you see an eagle feather, the reason why people use that is to remind us of the Creator, that our prayers are going up all around us, really, and that on the cellular level, we all have the Creator in and around us. And at one time, I'm going to look like this, but sometime my cells are going to look at something like something else. One more quick story. I go to these elders up in Canada to learn, and the fellow that I went to on Tuesday, he said, oh, gee, Hope, you got to see this. This came to me. It was gifted to me, and it was a water drum for use for healing. And he said, the name of this drum is Gebejigo Min. So Gebejigo Min, you know what that means, right? Oh, yeah. That means we are all one. He said, this drum came to remind us that we are all one. So he said, that drum's got a lot of work to do. It's like, I know, right? So in our language, you'll hear, when you talk about anything, you got to recognize that it's alive. There's a different verb that's used all the time if you're talking about the trees or the insects or all sorts of things that in English we don't think of as a being, a person, a living being. But you have to do that when you speak the language. So I'm just going to let you know when I'm starting the prayer. So I'm just going to ask as you go forward today, I know there's lots of things to be worked on, and I'm so grateful for young people and the people that have the energy to do this work. It's important work. It's healing work, even though at times it might feel full of fear and things that are difficult. Remember, you're doing this for all of us. And you might look at somebody and go like, oh, that's the enemy. No, you're really looking in a mirror. One of our old ways that family up in Canada still practices is if you really hate somebody, you gotta adopt them and take them into your home. Which you probably all heard stories about Native families adopting somebody from a different background and then they became a chief. We didn't look at the color of their skin, it was how helpful were they to the people. I'll translate as I'm talking. Bonjour, Dinoe Magani Duk, Nijibimadazik. Hello, all my different kinds of relatives, my fellow living beings. Mungu Mingi Kid, Mundinansikwe Indigo. I'm known by the spirits. My work here is Little Wind Woman. Miajagwa Indigenous Hope. I'm called Hope in English. Mikanak Nindu Dame. I'm of the Turtle Clan, so I'm truly a snapping turtle. Tonawanda Shkodagini and Dunjaba. I'm from Tonawanda Reservation. Miazagwan Yamin the Manawaganist Wajichigayang Nungum. I'm thinking of what we're trying to do here today. Ndo Kagwajamagongo Manidug, Ja Umapiajag, we named the Manawaganist Wa. Gashkatuyeg Awaganish Wiyajichigayang. I'm thinking of those spirits that are listening. They're listening to what we're trying to do here. Come and see what we're trying to do here. Megwago Gianaman Mia Ao Gitshemanidu, Gijemanidu, Manidu Megana Zid. Anujigo Gagorjan Akazawag. We know that the Creator has different forms in different ways of thinking. We might say great spirit, loving spirit, leading spirit, the Creator of all of this. We Piajayamanungu, we Ganawena Mishanam, we watch over all of us. Megwago Kiwi Pabama Samanungun, as we're walking here, Mozi Kamigunk, here on Mother Earth. Megwago Giwi Nainamano O, Gina Wind. Please help us and think of us in an unconditional love way. Well, you see what we're trying to do. Help me as I'm a pitiful human being, I may misspeak. Mi ongo mani du ganabadabiyegaman wabadung, jawanung, ningabianung, giwadanung. So we look at those four directions, to the east, to the south, to the west, to the north. All those beings in the earth that live in the earth, even the microscopic ones. Even those that we can't see. Even those that are living in the great river, the Mississippi, Mississippi. You give me all the different kinds of beings that live in there. Even those ones, all of those ones in the sky world that are watching over us, gonna wait a mission and watch over us. Meanwhile, give me a name young. Thank you for what you're doing. Give me a name we caution meanwhile, Joanna Missionam. Joanna Missionam gives you money do. 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 Chimigwich. Thank you, creative spirit, loving spirit that loves us so unconditionally. Aha, miigwech.
It's my great honor to introduce President Jenny Arthur, who's going to make a few remarks.
Hold on just a second. I was here. I just want to make a little announcement. We are going to go ahead and release a row at a time from the back to go get some water and a breakfast. And so if we can be really quiet while we do that and not disturb. And the other thing is, if you are doing Facebook Live, thank you so much. Please save it and upload it to the Facebook page. We can let you know where later. Thank you so much. And President Arthur, thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I want to thank Hope because she clearly embodies her English name as well, and you bring us hope with your words. It's important for us at Metropolitan State to acknowledge the fact that we are on Dakota land, that we are situated so close to so many sacred sites, the Wakan Teepee Cave, the mounds, the burial mounds, and we're not far from the confluence of the Mississippi and Minnesota rivers, which are believed to be the birthplace of the Dakota people. We know that this land did not come to us in a peaceful way, that it was taken from people involuntarily, and that imposes on us a huge responsibility to do what we can to improve our community so that everyone can thrive. I know that I want to extend a great thanks to our organizers today, Deb Mosby, Raj Setharaju, Nantawan Lewis, and Jill Wilkie. They came a couple of weeks ago with, we've got an idea, and we're on a timeline because we want to connect this to the 1 month anniversary of the killing of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd. And so I will say that they worked hard, and across this university, they named a number of different units, but I also want to say our Institute for Community Engagement and Scholarship, facilities management, financial management, IT, the provost's office staff, the president's office staff, our safety and safe return to work committee that is working on our longer term plan for the university. They put aside all of the work that they're doing at this near end of the year time and enthusiastically jumped in to say, how can we help make this happen? So I want to thank all of them as well. I want to thank you again for being here. We have 3 calls today. The first is to mourn. And we're here to mourn George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Philando Castile, Jamar Clark, Alton Sterling, Eric Garner. The list is endless. And there are names that we don't even know, that we can't call. We're also here to mourn that a Black boy in elementary school will be labeled as disruptive when white boys are labeled eager or enthusiastic. That the income for a typical Black family in Minnesota is less than half that of the typical white family. That for only 1/4 of Black families in the Twin Cities own their own home, a major way of transferring generational wealth, versus 75% of white families. That Black women in labor are more likely to die than white women because their white caregivers ignore their needs. That Black students are less likely to graduate from high school, much less college. That coronavirus, heart disease, diabetes, the other top killers of people, those silent killers sometimes, attack our Black colleagues and friends and sisters and brothers more than they do our white group. And I think, for me, the one I hold, my friend, a Black mother, who was so angry with her very successful Black son because he bought a Jaguar. And she wasn't angry because she thought it was a frivolous purpose. She was angry because she thought it would get him killed. Because Black men aren't supposed to be successful. They aren't supposed to drive Jaguars. At Metropolitan State, we aspire to be an anti-racist learning community, and we've done so for a long time. That's a lofty and admirable goal. But we have work to do. And to do that work, we must become an anti-racist learning community. Now, that might seem like a tautology, but what I mean by that is we have to be a learning community now that puts anti-racism at the center as its subject of study, reflection, and action. And I have to say, for my white race identity colleagues here and throughout our community, that means a lot of work. It means a lot of hard work for us, hard emotional work. Because to really study, reflect, and change, we're gonna have to feel all those negative emotions: fear, shame, guilt, incompetence, frustration, sorrow, anger, loss, humiliation. That's the work that has to be done. And if anyone knows the work of Robin DiAngelo, and she talks about white fragility, that's it. That's our fear of grappling with those really hard emotions and understanding what it says about who we are internally. It's the ultimate white privilege to not have to deal with those emotions. Yet our Black, brown, and Indigenous sisters and brothers don't have a choice, because we as a society impose on them those feelings. They have to get up in the morning and be fearful, like my friend, about her son. They're made to feel incompetent. They feel the frustration when we don't listen. So our work to do at this university. Now, I think when we think about work, we have to think about not just efforts, but outcomes. A couple of years ago, the USC Center on Race and Equity issued a report card for public higher education in this country. And they graded in every state the public higher education institutions. The state of Minnesota got a GPA of 1.94 on the equity index, okay? We're a D. Metro State, I suppose we can feel a little pride, but I don't want that to go too far, because we got a C. We're 2.75, that's our GPA, and we're the best in the state of Minnesota. We get an A for enrolling Black students. We get an A because the ratio of male Black students and female Black students, reflects the general enrollment in higher education, but we get a C for completion. And that is unacceptable. And when we delve into the reasons for why we get a C for completion, we'll find out the work that we need to be doing. So I do have hope. I have hope here. Hope shared her hope. And I have hope because we start this work with an advantage. We do have a university community. People here are committed to anti-racism. And they're committed to learning in, with, and from communities. And we need to embody that spirit now. I do want to end by letting you know about the good work of someone who has been associated with Metro State and believes in us as a university and what we can do. So a retiree stepped up last week and gave us $10,000 to begin the George Floyd Memorial Endowed Scholarship for Racial and Social Justice. And this week, when we had our foundation board meeting our foundation board trustees said, we're matching that. And furthermore, we're not going to wait for that endowment to grow. We're going to make sure you can award that scholarship this year. So for our students out there, you will soon have access to the application for that. So that's a start, and that's a hopeful thing, and something we can all contribute to in little ways or big ways. But the most important work is what we're going to do in terms of reflection and action. Thank you all so much for being here.
You may have noticed that breakfast has been brought out. If you need to step out and get some cold water or some breakfast, it's right around past those bushes. I am very proud today to present to you one of our students who's worked really hard. She is the vice president of the Black Student Union and has helped organize all the student volunteers along with Serena Shepard. So if you could give them a big hand, please. And Natasha, would you like to give a few remarks? Do you have your...
Hello, everybody. I'm already a loud person, so let me know if I'm way too loud with the microphone, okay? So yeah, my name is Natasha Jones. I'm the vice president of the Black Student Union, and I've been the vice president of the Black Student Union since October 2019. I would say we have been looking for opportunities to collaborate and opportunities to speak our voice on campus, and unfortunately, the death of George Floyd had provoked a lot of people to have a little bit more interest in our organization. Just like in my family, like when somebody dies, we really don't see each other, you know, until somebody dies, then we all get together and come from all over. A couple things that I just kind of wanted to touch on is the fact that everybody with those yellow shirts on, about 70 or 80% of those people with those yellow shirts on are Black Student Union members. So shout out to y'all. They sacrificed their time in a time where we could be mourning for George, for so many people that we lost. There's been deaths happening, last week? My friend Cody Pollard was killed we don't know if it was uptown or downtown. They changed the story. It was uptown, then it switched to downtown. So I'm not really sure. But then there were some people that were killed over north, 7 people. Unfortunately, we don't know their names. They don't post pictures of those people. We don't know, really anything about them. What my point is that I was already struggling with depression due to COVID-19. Everybody kind of surrendered their rights in the name of health, in the name of protection. And then on top of that, when you turn on the TV and you see somebody getting murdered, it was just overly tragic. I used to be friends with Philando Castile. So it kind of brought me right back to seeing my friend die. It was like George Floyd was like somebody who I went to school with. I want to lead by saying this, like I said, people hadn't been inviting us to so many different events. Now that, what had happened. And a lot of people talk to me about white privilege. And I just want to stand out here real quick and let everybody know that white privilege is really the grandchild of white supremacy. When we talked about the statistics about the disparities between people of color and people who are white, those disparities didn't happen by chance. It wasn't a fluke, or it's not because we're lesser than or dumber or nothing like that, or more violent. It's because of laws that existed here. And I'll break it down real quick. Matter of fact, on Friday, the Black Student Union meets via Zoom, and I will ask you guys to go to Engage and kind of connect with us. If you want to know information, let me know. But what I wanted to talk about is that over South Minneapolis, not too, maybe a block away from where George Floyd was killed, there used to be this thing called racial covenants. And racial covenants make it so that Black people, Native Americans, Asians, they broke it down. cannot buy property in certain areas in South Minneapolis. Now, there is still racial covenants in St. Paul, but they couldn't find the evidence of that because it's not scanned into the system, okay? The reason why I'm saying this is because, as she pointed out, wealth is passed down through those houses. So when you're able to buy property, you build equity, you're able to, give your family something. But from the 1900s all the way to the 1970s, Black people, Native American people, Hispanic people, Asian people were not allowed to purchase houses in certain areas. And while those areas got funding, got developed, built amazing schools, we were stuck somewhere else. And then after that, the Federal Highway Act destroyed, over there where Rondo days? Yeah. Rondo days used to be a prominent Black community. The Rondo days. The area over there by 94, Rondo, the library, a prominent Black community, but guess what? It got destroyed when they built a highway through that area. And that happened to every Black community throughout the United States. The point is, it's not that, what I want everybody to understand is that us Black people, I'm speaking for I'm Black, and everybody else, we have so many obstacles. And for me to even come right here today, you don't even know what it took for me to stand right here today, okay? So many, just obstacles at work, at school. Matter of fact, like I said, being a part of the Black Student Union, it was hard for us to actually utilize our budget. Like we had, the students paid student fees, right? We almost got 700, which is 70% of our budget not available to us for whatever reason. We put in an order, but they said that, it didn't go through right or whatever. I had to fight to get shirts, promo items, so that we can look unified when we do things together. As you can see, this is not a Black Student Union shirt. This is a different shirt, right? The logo that I wanted for our Black Student Union shirt, it was like African Pride Fist or whatever, but they didn't want to allow us to have that logo. I don't want to spill too many beans, but the point is, all I'm trying to say is this. It's an innumerable amount of obstacles that I face and that the Black Student Union face on an everyday basis, so much so that we almost want to change our name from Me and Black. We want to say, well, maybe we shouldn't be called the Black Student Union. Because, maybe we need to switch it into something else. Now, I don't want to make this speech about just being Black and white. It's so many of us that fall in between. To be honest, when America first started, it was like, what they said, like 36 different races or something like that. To be honest, before America even started, if you think about it, in Africa, it is like 2,000 different languages and a whole bunch of different tribes. In Africa, at the time, before slavery, they didn't see each other all as the same, right? They all were different. They spoke different languages, ate different food, praised different lords, all of that, right? But when we came to United States, that's when we learned unity. That's when we learned that, hey, you might be from a different tribe, but we all are Black. We all are one. So we don't focus on, all the differences. So my point is that sometimes tragedy creates more unity. We're able to come together better when we can see an obstacle. Sometimes, like what they say, pain is a motivator. Sometimes when people give you pain, and what they say, pressure makes diamonds. You know what I mean? So I'll just leave with the last words of, I want to thank everybody from the Black Student Union for surrendering some of their day. They couldn't bring their kids. Some people weren't able to have to find a babysitter or called off of work to help me out. And 70 or 80% of the people you see gave up some time to make sure that we support something that's against racism, because the school needs to hear it. If we want to know what can Metropolitan State do to get a better grade than a C, please come talk to me or come visit our Black Student Union meetings on Fridays, because we got a lot to add to the story. Because I can let you know that people came up to me and let me know that they had poor experiences while volunteering. And I'll point it out and let you know what people we're talking about. But anyway, thank you so much for allowing me the chance to speak. And I hope you guys learned a lot. It's not just about like mourning and being sad or letting somebody put you down about your race or anything like that. What it's about is make sure that you are creating change. Don't just sit around and listen and be like, well, I never say the N-word, so I don't feel racist, or you know what I mean? But what it is you need to take action. When you see that you have opportunity available, Why don't you just step out of your comfort zone and offer it to somebody that look a little bit different than you? Just try it out. Just try it out. All right, thank you so much. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, dang, I'm not using it. Okay, y'all, we have an amazing keynote presented by none other than our president for NAACP, by Minneapolis, the youngest president. Give it up for Leslie Beckman.
Dr. Raj, I just need to take you everywhere with me. Thank you so much. Grace and peace, everyone. Again, my name is Leslie E. Redmond, and beyond all my degrees and the NAACP, I am a human being first, right? And that's why I'm here today, because we are fighting very hard for our humanity and for it to be acknowledged on American soil, which is an injustice, which is horrible, but it is the fight nevertheless. Let's say his name one time. George Floyd. Say his name one more time. George Floyd. I see my sister Chantel Allen, school board member for the St. Paul Education. Shout out to the school board. You all are just making some tremendous strides. So shout out to y'all. I have a number of my executive committee members, Ms. Cynthia, Anika, Dr. Raj is on our executive committee. The NAACP is just doing tremendous work, so I encourage you all to follow us on social media, take a look at what we're doing and activate. And just like Natasha talked about, and I want to salute that sister because I know what it's like to be in these institutions. And, you know, it sounds good and great when we get on the stage and when we put our mission statements together, but it's about the work that's actually being done. And I always tell people, if you look around, there's probably a Black woman or a Black man that can guide you in the right direction if you want to know where to go, right? That becomes a question because the answers aren't too far, and too often they lie in our own community, but we continue to silence the very voices that could bring about change. Right, Sister Siobhan? I see Sister Siobhan Johnson, Mother Earth, walking in. All right, so what I want to talk to you all about today is I came up with this campaign, this movement that has taken a life of its own, and it's called Don't Complain, Activate. Say it with me one time. Don't complain, activate. One more time. Don't complain, activate. And the idea is that you don't have to be President Barack Obama or Beyonce Knowles Carter in order to activate your community, right? You can activate your community as a mom or a dad. You can activate your community as a vice president for the Black Student Union. You can activate your community as a teacher, as an artist. You can activate your community as a lawyer and activist such as myself, right? There are so many forms to activate. We just need to pick one, right? And as the Native sister was saying earlier when she was up here, it's not as much about mourning as it is about activating, right? My grandmother's favorite song back in the day was I Won't Complain, right, Miss Regina? Miss Regina know that song, I Won't Complain. And so it's fitting that her granddaughter would come up with this Don't Complain, Activate campaign. And with DCA, there are 3 C's of activation: communication, collaboration, and compassion. Y'all gonna remember that? Communication, collaboration, and compassion, right? So with communication, the great Kendrick Lamar, he once said, communication builds relations. And I believe that, right? Too often we're not communicating with each other, we're communicating at each other, right? It's about perspective and lenses, and we all think that we're right versus actually listening to each other and making sure we're building understanding. So when I think about communication, I think about the importance of us separating myths from facts, right? In America, there are a lot of myths that exist, right? We have the myth that Black women don't get along, which we know that ain't true. Can we say that ain't true? That ain't true. And I know what I said. I said that ain't true. And I said that very intentionally. That ain't true, right? We have these myths that Black people are in their position because they want to be in this position. Or we have the myth that America is just this great nation in and of itself, right? And we don't talk about the stolen land, and we don't talk about the Black bodies and the free labor that it's been built upon, right? And as Sister Natasha was saying, that the wealth that has been passed down from generation is built on the backs of enslaved Africans on American soil, right? We talk about this myth of Black Black people being free in America, but our reality is that we are still in chains, right? And so when we talk about communicating, we have to separate myths from facts, right? The facts is that Black people are people, right? Like that's what we have to tie into, right? Because it is our humanity that has been stripped from us for over 400 years in this country, right? And one of the things I like to say when we talk about it's not good enough just to be not racist, you got to be anti-racist. It's about acknowledging that Black people have experienced racism for over 400 years in this country. So I think we know what it looks like. So instead of trying to invalidate us when we come and tell you we've experienced racism, you should first validate us and then let's dig into the facts, right? When we think about sexism and how Black women are uniquely positioned where not only are we Black in America, but we are also a woman. And so we're fighting misogyny and sexism just as much as we're fighting racism, right? And that we are uniquely positioned, and instead of looking at us as a liability, we should be looked at as an asset, right? Because for me, I believe in a God that sits high and he looks low. And if you look through any Bible or Quran or any form of doctrine, God has a special place in his heart for oppressed people. Right? And if anybody knows anything, Black people and Black women, we have been oppressed in this nation, right? And through our oppression, we have great wisdom that has come through with that, right? And instead of trying to keep your knee on our neck, like we did Brother George Floyd and cause his untimely death, right, Brother Kevin? Why don't we take our knees off the necks of Black bodies and people all over this world and allow them to breathe, right? And that's when we talk about communication. Is the knee on George Floyd's neck was not just the literal knee, but it was a figurative knee that has been on all of our necks for over 400 years, right? It's acknowledging the bondage and the oppression that we face on a day-to-day basis, right? It's communicating the needs that are on our necks in educational institutions, and that these systems have built an immune system to push out the very people that could spark change and activation, right? When I went to the University of St. Thomas, so I didn't say I have a Juris Doctorate and a Master's of Business Administration from the University of St. Thomas, and I'm a licensed attorney, and I'm a first-generation college graduate. And so when Natasha talks about the burdens, right, and the obstacles and the hardships that we've had to overcome to come here today, I know too well what she's referring to, right? And know that I didn't accomplish that. And honestly, I feel like I experienced more oppression here in Minnesota as a law school student and a business school student than I did in the inner city in poverty in public schools, right? And that's just something to think about. Minnesota's feeling too much like Mississippi, right? And the knees on our necks are suffocating us, and we are dying slow deaths, right? Not just in those 8 minutes and 30 seconds, but we're dying extremely slow deaths. And when you put it into perspective, when we're talking about communication, our brother George Floyd was able to survive a deadly killer by the name of COVID-19, but couldn't survive white supremacy. And if America and Minnesota and Minneapolis had listened to the cries of Black people for so long, they would have known about the knees on our neck. But we've continued to be silenced. And what I don't want is for us to commercialize and to create these exceptions to rules as we always do. And now we're listening to Black people somewhat. We're listening to them just to make ourselves seem a little less racist, right? We're listening to them, but we're not really listening to them. We're not really giving them seats at the table. We're not really putting them in decision-making positions, right? We just want to look good. And if I could communicate one thing today, is stop trying to look good, Minnesota. Take off your makeup, Minnesota, and show your truth. Be your truth. And the reality of the situation is that white supremacy thrives on American soil. It thrives in Minnesota. It thrives in St. Paul and Minneapolis. And if we're being honest, it probably thrives right here on this campus. And President Arthur, not just this campus alone, and I want to shout out President Arthur because she was very transparent about the hardships and the oppression, and that even when you look good, you ain't doing that good, right? And I think that's something that Minnesota can learn from, because for far too often, we pride ourselves on being one of the greatest states in the nation, but the question became for whom, right? For white Minnesotans, this was a white Wakanda that was able to hide from the rest of the world and have some of the best trinkets and best healthcare systems and education systems and best standard of living. But when we looked at our black brothers and sisters, it told a very different story. It told a story of oppression. It told a story of white supremacy. It told a story of knees on our necks. Right, Miss Regina? And so we have an opportunity right now. We have an opportunity to go to my second C, right? What's the second C? Collaboration, right? One of my business professors, he once told me that people like to do business with people they know, they like, and they trust, right? Too often, we don't even know each other. White supremacy does an amazing job at dividing us, of having us create this idea of the other, right? That you got a little bit more melanin, or you light skin and I'm brown skin and they're dark skin, and you come from a very rich socioeconomic background and I come from poverty, but we don't realize just how much we have in common, right? Right? And how much we could work together. And if we're going to make it through this, we have to work together. COVID-19 showed us that, right? Is that it only worked if all of us were wearing masks, right? Not just the population that we knew was infected, even a population that weren't showing signs and conditions. So even when you aren't showing signs and conditions of racism, we need you to wear your mask against white supremacy too, okay? Even when you're not using the N-word, even when you don't blatantly see your knee on the neck, maybe your knee on the neck is by saying the same thing that that black person just said and taking credit for. Maybe it's touching that black woman's hair when she asked you not to. Maybe it is making black women out to be the angry black woman and making black men out to be the super predators at all times. Maybe it's continuing to try to freeze our budgets and make us work extra hard when we recognize that we're not fighting even for equality. I'm very serious about fighting for equity. And we don't all start at the same place, so the same resources don't need to be poured into our communities. And again, COVID-19 showed us that we were able to withdraw massive resources to specific communities based on their needs. Why don't we recognize the same thing when it comes to the black community? Why don't we recognize the same thing when we think about the 13th Amendment that theoretically freed us, but then created a caveat, Brother Kevin, and said, except if we are duly convicted of a crime, Sister Sharon, and now we have brothers and sisters in mass incarceration, right? We have brothers and sisters right now that I haven't heard anybody talking about how COVID-19 is impacting them. I haven't heard anybody talk about how families are not able to visit them, about how they're being just completely treated. I didn't think prison systems could get any worse, Brother Kevin. I thought they were the worst that it could get until COVID-19 hit. And this is when we talk about communication and collaboration, we have to recognize that even our brothers and sisters that are out of sight and out of mind, we got to even be thinking about them. And thinking about their burden, thinking about the education system that to me is the first form of slavery. I'm gonna write this book called 12 Years of Slavery, the American Education System one day, and talk about just how much the American education system has their knees on the necks of little black kids and are preventing them from breathing long before they even reach the age to enter into the criminal justice system. And because my time is limited, I'm gonna go to the third C of activation, amen? So we talked about communication, we talked about collaboration, now we're going to talk about compassion. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, he once told us that darkness could not draw out darkness, only light could do that. And hate could not draw out hate, only love can do that. And I think that is exactly where we are positioned today. And one of the things that I realized is that we were asking of people what they haven't even given to themselves, right? And so when I talk to my white brothers and sisters and my black brothers and sisters and my Native and Hmong and everybody else, I say, if I don't have $5, I can't give you $5. If I don't have compassion for myself, I can't extend it to anybody else. Right? And that's something that we don't always talk about because we live in a very capitalist society that in fact has their knee on all of our necks, right? And is using us and using us against each other. And because I believe that we are in a spiritual warfare, I believe that humanity has to bind together and work together for each and every one of us are good, right? And we have to be compassionate with ourselves. And what does that look like? Maybe going to therapy. maybe taking a moment to take a deep breath. Can we just take a moment right now to just take a deep breath? Dr. Raj is better at this than me, but he talks about inhaling for 3 seconds and then exhaling for 3 seconds. Let's just take a deep breath. And another one. One more time. And breathing is just so important because life starts and ends with taking breaths, right? I believe white supremacy could end with taking deep breaths, right? With us taking a moment to breathe and to think about how we have the knees on the necks of our brothers and sisters and seeing their humanity and not only recognizing our white privilege, but as Dr. Resmus talks about, recognizing our white advantage and the advantages that we have and that we wouldn't have but for Black people in America. Specifically the descendants of the enslaved Africans, who we like to erase by talking about people of color and everything else, right? And so it's having real compassion. And sometimes compassion means stepping to the side. Sometimes it means allowing Black people to reclaim our time and say, you know, we've talked for the last 400 years, I'm gonna pass the mic. That's what it looks like. It looks like compensating Black people accurately. Black people, I telling people, it is an injustice, and I know my ancestors would turn over in their grave if they knew how much free labor Black people are giving out. People don't know this about the NAACP, but we're a volunteer-ran NAACP. We're not getting compensated, right, Miss Cynthia? That's our treasurer right there, okay? We work a lot, and we are not compensated for it, right? We like to talk about, you all know, y'all probably have used this expression before, I wanna pick your brain. Have enough compassion to stop picking the brains, stop taking our intellectual property, right, Sister Siobhan? And saying, you know what, I'm going to compensate you, right? I'm going to pay you what you are worth, amen? So when y'all hit me up for speaking engagements, compensate us for what we are worth. When you think about giving us positions as professors, compensate us and then give us the free range to do our job. One of the reasons why a lot of us aren't in certain spaces is because I have limited patience for white supremacy running rapid and white people micromanaging Black brilliance. I do not have the energy or the capacity or the desire to put myself in a space that will compromise my peace of mind. So create spaces for us where we can thrive and be our best, because I promise you, it is only going to make the world a better place, because when Black people do better, and this is what the stats show us, when Black people do better, everybody does better. So again, I'm gonna leave y'all with don't complain, activate, and my 3 C's of activation: communication, collaboration, and compassion. Grace and peace, everybody. And I just want to say, y'all are in very good hands. I've looked at the rest of the program. Y'all better appreciate this Black excellence that is about to grace y'all. I have to head out, and I'm so sad I'm gonna miss it, but y'all are in amazing hands. God bless you all.
Y'all give a standing ovation. Let's give it up for Leslie right now.
themes that emerged from our June 9th Zoom meeting, right? After we talking about what we're gonna do after George Floyd. So we have 6 themes. Robert, you're gonna talk about that?
So the 6 themes that we're going to organize around and do action planning around are education and training, data analysis, data collection and data analysis. So education and training will be facilitated by Derek Krim.
Yep, thank you.
Right there. He's going to be number 1. Data collection will be facilitated by Ray over here. 3, hiring, retention, and promotion of Black faculty and diverse employees. I'll facilitate that at poster number 3 over there. Number 4, mentoring Indigenous, Black, and students of color will be facilitated by Willie Winston right here. And you'll be where? Right over there at number 1, he says. At circle number 1. Number 5, expanding partnership with alumni and community will be facilitated by Jody Bentley right here. So just look at where they are and follow them after this. Lastly, policy and procedures reform will be facilitated by Victor Cole back here. All right. So again, education and training, Derek Krim right here. Data collection and data analysis, Ray right here. Hiring, retention, and promotion of Black faculty and diverse employees, that's me. 4, mentoring Indigenous, Black, and students of color with Willie right there. And 5, expanding partnerships with alumni and community will be with Jody right here. And 6, policy and procedures reform with Brother Victor right here.
Okay, so now you choose. Please, everybody choose which group and work on the theme. And we need to do it now. You will have within the group, you will have to choose the recorder, and then the facilitator will explain to you the process. So please disperse now. Okay, group leaders. Please come up to the front, please. And also bring your reporters with you. Okay, in the light of time, we will begin hearing a report from group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we start with group 1. And remember, I would like to remind you as well that these action themes came from the June 9th Zoom meeting that was hosted by ARC, by Anti-Racism Coalition, to bring the community together and to think together in terms of what should we do so that this kind of killing, this kind of systemic oppression would not happen again. So we came up with 6 themes for our university and our community. The first one is education and training. And the assignment for each group is that to come up with 3 priorities. So we'll hear 3 priorities from each group. And then this recommendation will not be just sitting on a piece of paper, but it will be forwarded or be moved to appropriate committees, to appropriate communities to address. So your work today is very important to us, and we appreciate your ideas and your suggestions. So now we're going to begin to hear what they are. So group 1, please.
And I'll run the mic. Who's going to? Oh, you're going to say. I thought your group was going to.
Oh, yeah, we're going to come to the microphone. My name is Derek, and we had...
Everybody give it up for Derek Graham. Woo!
Yeah. I had the group education and training, and we specifically talked about one priority, but we wanted to make sure that people understood the depth of it. So the priority is training people to work with different cultures, including immigrants. But there's a couple of things you should know. That training has to and must be with leaders, staff, faculty, and students, with the voice of students. The training is not a commercial training. It's not a diversity that has been diluted since the 90s, but it's one that is courageous and brave, that really offers and wants courageous conversation that includes understanding our communication with others, understanding microaggressions, understanding how emotional rupture impacts relationships. And that is just basically what happens when a microaggression goes unintervened. There's an emotional rupture that destroys the relationship. And basically, they could not help but to say that we need to wake people up. And the students in the group said, I definitely must have more teachers of color. Just, I had to say it. Next, I'm going to invite the leader for Group 2 to come on up.
Way to go, Ray. Everybody give it up for Ray. Professor.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kate.
Hi, Kate.
So we were looking at data collection and data analysis, and we came up with 3 things we wanted to look at, including a further breakdown of academic outcomes of data by race, ethnicity, gender, financial aid status, looking at not just overall across the university, but down to the course level even, or identifying potential issues within different schools at Metro State. Then we wanted to look at qualitative data about the educational experience, and this doesn't mean waiting until the end of a class is done and seeing how people feel about the class, but asking people early on in a course how they feel welcome, how supported they are from their professors and things. That way we can address issues earlier on in the semester. And then we also want to look at who is accessing services. So who uses the library, who works with their advisors, and figure out if there are discrepancies between who's using the service and what the student population looks like, what we can do to better support students. And then so taking those 3 things, really using that to inform this data should inform teaching, university services, and just really, because you'd want to see these services and the information we're getting back from people to look like the student population does. So, anything else? Thank you. So Group 3.
Y'all, this man is amazing. He's about to speak. This is Professor O'Connor. Everybody give it up for Professor O'Connor.
He's my hype man. So, all right. That's what we call that. All right, so Group 3 over there in the shade. Very good. So we were looking at how to hire, retain, and promote Black and diverse employees here at Metropolitan State University. First piece that we came up with was to identify and establish as a goal parity of employees, the percentages of employees with the percentages of students of color that represent our institution in administration, in faculty, and in staff. So parity as a goal. 2, to promote leaders, not just the informal ones. Oftentimes, Black, Indigenous people of color take up informal leadership that's not oftentimes recognized, but added to their plate. So to recognize leaders and to create and grow our own leaders, and to improve the recruitment process for leadership. 3, examine the hiring process and the selection process audited to see if there is any kind of selection bias in that system that automatically reduces the outcome of available candidates. So look at who gets screened out. Look at the CVs and resumes. Is there any difference there? And to import or include bias training in the actual selection process so that we are informed about how confirmation bias and selection bias and all that stuff unconscious and consciously plays out in the process. It is not enough to simply add a question when we're interviewing candidates, but to be aware of how the preferences and our biases work in maintaining the status quo. As part of that bias, we want to broaden the selection community, the pool of candidates, be intentional about going to diverse environments. So if we're here, we're not just simply putting ads in the Star Tribune, but perhaps we're putting ads in La Prensa or Insight, Spokesman Recorder, the Hmong Times, the Quarterly Press, all across the country, and identifying. We are tired of hearing that we can't find any of those. Well, we're looking in the wrong places. We don't value the faces that we are looking for. So we need to expand that process. And if we don't know where to go, ask your people, the people who are here, the students, the staff, the employees, the advisors, the faculty. People know where to go, all right? Okay, so we're a little bit overachievers, so we got one more. So identify, so on retention, so part of the best recruitment process is to have a very solid retention process and create environments where people want to stay and where they can not just survive, but where they can thrive. That makes a big difference. So identifying, somebody asked, well, what are our existing retention practices here at the university? We all looked around the circle, said, we don't know. So identify what are the existing retention practices and create new retention practices that are based upon what the needs are of the communities that we actually want to retain. As part of that process, do exit interviews. And not only exit interviews, but stay interviews. How about interviewing people before they are ready to leave the university? And identify what are some of the challenges that they might have. Identify specific intervals that you might interview people and identify what their experience is so that you can capture and retain them, not just simply after they have exited the university. So people have talked about the idea that people simply leave, specifically people of color leave under various circumstances, and you never know exactly why they left. And it's an HR issue, so you never get any specific information. So to change that, to actually have an interview process, an exit interview, but also a stay interview as well. I think that's it. Improve, expand mentorship. We already have a good mentorship program led by Brother Krim here and Antoine. All right, that's my group. Group 3. Group 4 is up.
Here, there's another great professor here, Willie Winston. Everybody give it up.
Thank you. I had the group talking about mentoring Black, Indigenous, and other students of color. We had a wonderful engagement with a lot of people, and we came up with a lot of ideas, 3 pages of ideas. I will try to synthesize this down into 3 or 4 different areas that students, which I want to emphasize, students had a say-so in the things that we could be doing here at Metro State. These are in no specific order, but the one that stood out to us first and foremost, one student identified that we really should be able to acknowledge the land that we stand on, the graves that we walk on, the people who were here way before any of us. We should have not only verbal acknowledgement, there should be monuments, there should be buildings, there should be things that we could show how we appreciate the students who come here. And right now we don't have that. So that's one thing that we should think about doing, is have some type of monuments, memorials that identify those who have been here before us and those who have paved the way for all of us. That was one. The second idea that people thought was really helpful was we need to really just have a mentoring program for students. Right? We don't have that. And whether that is something that's more faculty and students or peer-to-peer or alumni to peer, we need to have a formal mentorship program. Students of color come here and they don't know faculty of color. They don't know anybody. They're here and they're just struggling on their own. And so we need to formalize this mentorship program. We got a lot of pages here, so.
All right, take your time, bro. Take your time.
Another idea is to pair up students with one another. At some colleges, seniors are paired with juniors, they're paired with freshmen to make sure that they know that they have someone that they can turn to. In all of my courses, I try to encourage our students to get to know one another, to network. You'll be amazed at who is sitting right beside you. And so as we are developing our mentorship program, we really do need to think about how we connect students with one another. Another idea that students came up with, and faculty, we need to create curricula that crosses all disciplines, that deals with races, anti-racism, anti-oppression, and white supremacy. Yes, we have our rigor courses, but that's not enough. We need to develop more that cuts across all different departments. That could really help our students understand. It could help all of our students not feel like they're the only one having to talk about this in our classes. So those are three things that I think we could do right away that could actually help our students feel like this is their university and feel more comfortable coming here to Metro State.
All right. Brother Winston. In the house. Goodbye.
So next we have group 5 coming up. Not really. Oh, next week. Maybe we have group 6 coming up. We have group 6. Okay, we have group 6. Not really.
All right, so my group came up with policy and procedure. So my group came up with policy, procedures, and practices for reform. And what we specifically picked was just how we practice intertwining our departments together.
Let me help you out.
So we use interdisciplinary work between departments like ethnic studies and human services and social work. Pretty much what that means is while we're working with our departments, we're working with other departments so that we're all on the same page. Most of the time what you see, like me, I was in the criminal justice field for a little bit, and you don't really go over social work or human services as much as you do with your other stuff. So we want to intertwine these services together. The reason why this usually happens is because a lot of our groups are so focused on doing their specific departments. For example, if my group is a nursing department, we're not going to be doing too much within the police department or stuff like that. So we want to intertwine our groups or departments together so that we come together and help each other so we're on the same page. So, but yeah, that's what my group came up with. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I think your glasses have to go out first. Yeah.
On behalf of the event organizer, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank you for your ideas, for your suggestions. And I am also asked to have the final few words with you. I'm honored to be given a task to offer some final thought on this meaningful day of our university. I want to offer 3 points, three brief points for your consideration as you walk out of this arena this afternoon. First, it is heartening for me after we lived through and witnessed the first 2 weeks in the aftermath of the tragic death of our community member George Floyd, that we are here today together to offer community remembrance of his death. The 100 years anniversary of the lynching of Elias Creighton, Elmer Clark Jackson, and Isaac McGee in Duluth, the 1862 Mankato Massacre, and the 1876 Battle of Little Bighorn, which actually was today. This gathering signifies a community racial reckoning. As an academic institution, Juneteenth should be taught throughout our curriculum. In his remark of the Black Wall Street Massacre in Tulsa, Oklahoma in June 1921, which to many was the most single incident of racial violence in our country in modern history, Hannibal Johnson, a professor of African American history and a Tulsan, submitted that the community's racial reckoning and reconciliation must take a 3-step process. They are acknowledgement, apology, and atonement. I believe these are the AAA steps for our university community as well. Acknowledgement, apology, and atonement. Today, we acknowledge the wounds that have been inflicted on Black, Indigenous people, and people of color by systemic racism and the interlocking of structural oppression. In commemorate the Juneteenth events, we named the courses in our learning circles this morning: needs of oppression in all dimensions, institutional, symbolic, and individual, as Patricia Collins reminds us. What should be our resolve from this acknowledgement and racial reckoning? In our collective action session, we call for action to end oppression and to overcome racism in all forms and expression. Our act of atonement, to use Professor Hannibal Johnson's word, is to unite in solidarity with Black, Indigenous, and people of color in removing the needs of oppression. Recommendation from our small groups collaboration gives us direction as to what should be done and in what order to implement them. I am, lastly, calling on the university community to stand together in carrying out these actions and to do justice to that so that peace can prevail. Let us make this university a beacon on the hill. Let us make this university great for our community and for everyone. Thank you, everyone, for your work and for your act of conscience. Let us do justice and make peace for all, because only then that we will be free. Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you.